Good morning, Robyn.
Good morning, Lewis.
How are you today?
I'm pretty busy. I'm good and I'm excited.
Good. Well, I'm so honored that you joined me in this conversation today, and you've been a real ally to me in this project from the beginning. And I really want to thank you for supporting this initiative.
Well, I think it's so important whenever any of us are making changes that we find a friend that can stand beside us because it is an adventure and there are amazing things that happen and so there's some pretty scary stuff too. So it's always good to have a friend.
Absolutely. And so what I wanted to really talk to you about today is um, initially just women saving the world as a concept. And as you know, because we've talked, I was inspired by His Holiness the Dalai Lama when he said in Vancouver this past fall, 2009, the world will be saved by Western women. And I have to tell you, when I started thinking that, when that phrase hit me, I started thinking of all the women that I knew that were changing the world. You're one of them, Robyn, and so I want to get your perspective on that quote.
Well, I think it takes the realization that we all share this same space, and I mean, I certainly wasn't raised to think that way. I'm not raised an environmentalist at all. I was raised in Houston, Texas, which by definition is the most toxic town in the country. And as shit Winkies and pool boys as a kid, I really didn't get this. I figured, whatever was the most convenient, if I paid for it, that was my way of accommodating, the resources that I was using. And suddenly, as I became a mother and I traded the Wall Street, briefcase for a diaper bag, I realized that there was a greater responsibility here, and I was brought to it through the health of the children. But what I have found is that as women, as mothers, there is something very intuitive about the need to nurture and the ability to provide nourishment. We do it every day to our children. And then as you start to realize that there's this greater connectivity between all of us, you realize, wow, we can all play a part in restoring not only the health of our children, but the health of the planet.
And when you say that, you reminded me of the last interview I did was with Tom Blue Wolf, and he said, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said that women are the protectors of the culture and the story. If you want to get the the fun, I call it the big fish story. You go to Grandpa, but if you want to know the cultural distance of our community, you speak to women. And when you just said that right now, I really started thinking about that understanding of sort of the long-term fabric of how we're interconnected through birth and generations and all is I think a quality that women, as you said, intuitively tap into. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was there before I had children, but I do know that my sensitivity was heightened once I had kids. And it was the little things like when you're pregnant with your first baby, you're so aware of what you eat and what you put into your body and how that's affecting your body so that then you can provide the best, nourishment for that baby that's growing inside of you. And you suddenly, you're very aware and it's like all of your systems turn on.
Mhm. So that being said, I want to talk a little bit about your work and what you're doing. And as you said before, I mean, you were not setting out to become any type of activist. That was not your goal or mission. And if you can just kind of share with this audience what happened that made you come alive on this issue.
I mean, in all candor, Lewis, activism was sort of a dirty word in the house in which I was raised. It was sort of you trust the system, you believe in the system, you abide by that system, and you never question authority. And so as I came into this awareness, and it was, really brought to me through the health of one of my children. The story, that is so common that most people know is of a food allergic reaction that my fourth child had, but it was actually a blood disease in one of my other children that really it threw me to the floor. And we've all had those moments where life just literally throws you down. And at that point, you either decide, you're going to lay there or you're going to get up. And as a mother of four, I had no choice but to get up. And as I tried to dust myself off and put the Band-Aids on my scraped knees like any mom does, I suddenly realized that I had this greater responsibility and that having come through such an enormous transformation myself, that I had an ability to really help people navigate that transition themselves in their own families. And as I learned, there was incredible pollution that had happened to the US food supply. And that pollution was directly correlated with the onset of things like autism, ADHD, allergies, and asthma. And as I began to use my background in finance and research and the Wall Street analyst experience that I had, I learned some pretty shocking things that I really didn't want to know. And as I really wrestled with that information, there were times where it grew pretty toxic inside of me, and I could feel that. You could see it physically in how I appeared. And yet at the same time, I thought, I have a responsibility to my children. And when I learned that the American kids hadn't been valued the same way that children around the world had been valued, I realized, we had a lot of work to do. And so with that, I started doing just one thing. And that really was the beginning of my message.